Hello. There comes a time when you just look at what's in the mirror, so to speak, the camera, and you just think, I need to press play. Otherwise, I will be trying to get this framing sorted out for the next few millennia, maybe. I have got a cup of coffee, and I am about to do the evolution of a reader tag, simply because it is irresistible. So thank you very much to Spread Books Joy for creating it for us all. And I'm seeing so many different versions circling around on Booktube. I think it's going to keep us amused for weeks to come, and I hope everyone is enjoying watching the videos. There comes a point when you start to speak about yourself on YouTube where you think, who cares? Really, is it of interest to anybody else? But I'm going to assume that somebody somewhere will be here for the books, as I am, and not here to see beautiful people talking about the books that are most popular. And I'm a bit of a white unicorn in the Booktube community. I love books on art and art history. I love books in comedy and humour, and I'm still looking for other people to link with who enjoy the same kind of books. So if you are of that interest level and interest area, please drop a comment. Okay, let's get to the questions. Number one, what do you read? How has your taste in books evolved? Well, I was somebody who struggled a bit with learning to read at the start, and one of the things, as I thought about it for this tag, I realised was key was that one time I was sick for a few weeks in bed, a couple of weeks, maybe it was measles or chickenpox or some kind of childhood disease, I don't know, but I was in bed anyway for what were days but seemed like forever, and to pass the time my mother let me look at her recipe cards, and she had a box full of cards, and you would have a lovely picture of this recipe, and then there would be the words of how to make it. And I looked through that many times, planning little picnics or ideas together or pictures for the books, and or not the books, the recipes. And I think that's really what has sparked a lot of what I read, that I love to have images as well as words together and not just words only. And the books I read at the start were Ladybird books, which now have recircled and have been made into pastiches, and modern obsessions and so forth are comically put beside the old photographs. Peter runs a micro still from the basement of a condemned electricity substation. Here he makes craft gin infused with sausage and toothpaste. Peter is available as an app. A key writer for me was Dick Bruna, who had a wonderfully graphic line, very simple, colourful images. The only ones that really remain, only ones of his books that remain in print, are Miffy, the little rabbit, which doesn't really do anything for me, but the other books, the A to Z, especially the alphabet, was just fabulous. Then, of course, I read lots of Ada Blyton, and then we also had some old books which my mum had when she was a child, so they were the old versions of the famous fives and so forth. And then after that I went on to reading about Shelley girls, and then because I was in the children's library, children's ticket, I was seeing lots of graphic books, which would have been Tintin, but especially Asterix and Obelix. I was intrigued by the fact that you could get the same adventures in different languages, including at the time I think Latin as well, but French and so forth. And I went on to be interested in languages. There may be a connection there. I do remember in summertime having about 8 tickets and going in and using them all in a day, reading all the books, because they were very, very short books and returning them and having a speed of turnover that surprised other people but didn't surprise me. And I think that's where I built up my speed in reading. And I do remember Professor Brainstorm books. I wonder if anybody else remembers those, about high comedy, about and farce, about a mad inventor with lots and lots of spectacles, and yeah, they were quite a joy. Going on then, when I was at secondary level school, I just took a fancy to reading the classics, and I read lots of Dickens and the Brontes and various people like that. So it's interesting to see people now engaging with them on YouTube. Classics seem to be very popular. Then I went on to work in an academic library, which was wonderful. Part of my work was dealing with the box of books that had freshly arrived. And possibly around that time I began to become more interested in non-fiction. So at one point I was all about fiction, then I changed to non-fiction, and that has stayed mostly with me. Again, that's quite unusual on Booktube. Most people are very keen on fiction, and I've never really got into fantasy or science fiction. So again, that's another whole tranche, whole slice of people in Booktube who will find my interests odd. And as I began to deal with ordering books, I began to realise, to my horror, that books go out of print. And at that point, I became less of a library book borrower and much more inclined to buy books. And that's when I really began to buy what would now be my personal collection of books. Library's too grand a word for it. Going on from that, I became interested in writing, and I was interested in writing comedy. So I began to collect lots of books about comedy, comedians, humour people, and the occasional book about comedy films, which are a mixture of two interests together. And yeah, continued reading non-fiction. Then I became very interested in art history, and so that is a vast amount of what I have as books are art books, art history books. And they of course have a storage problem because they're always quite tall and you're trying to squish them into your bookshelves, and you end up having to have shelves that are quite high and using up a lot more space. But they tend to be the books that I lift up and look at, or I want to remember a particular painter or a picture or a set of colours, and so I just have those for quick reference books. One of the key writers for me growing up was P.G. Wodehouse. That was my first really venturing into the adult section of the library, and loved him, read his books voraciously. I have a whole shelf of them now. Obviously one shelf of P.G. Wodehouse means you've only got about a third of the books he wrote, because he wrote so many. But they continue to be a source of joy when I read them. The use of the language, use of the words, and I know that the actor Stephen Fry was also a keen fan of P.G. Wodehouse in his youth, and he wrote a letter to P.G. Wodehouse and got back a signed photo. And I did not know it at the time, but that was something he faithfully did to his many correspondents. And if I'd known that, I might have had the courage to write a letter to him, and I might have a signed photograph of P.G. Wodehouse, but I don't. But the picture at the back of the books to me became the epitome of what an author was. That you had a tweedy jacket and you smoked a pipe and you had this series of bookshelves behind you, and yeah, that was what a writer was, which is quite endearing. I like the fact that he wrote books that he enjoyed himself. And I think that's always a test of a writer, is that you write a book that you enjoy, or you laugh at your own jokes as you're writing it. Okay. Yeah, so really the evolvement of my taste has been that I'm now really very concentrated on reading non-fiction books. I'm interested in the way the different arts work together, so I'm interested in books which combine the arts, which is looking at where the arts crossover. That's called intermediality, and now studying that, I've gone back to university, and that's fascinating to me. Because I'm studying, I'm now reading a lot of books that are academic, which are varying in style. You can have an academic book that is written in an interesting way, and you can have other ones where you feel that the person has reached the point of panic about writing academically and has reached for a book which gives them synonyms, big words wherever they could use a small one, and the writing becomes quite confused, or they just simply write a sentence that is a paragraph, which becomes heavy work to read. So I'm very much in favour of academic books being readable, and when they are, it's a fantastic thing. It is a joy because you're learning while you're reading, it's making you think, but you can follow it, and I love that. How you read, has the format of your reading changed much? No. I still like the real book in my hand. I like being able to take it anywhere, that it's portable. It's, as somebody's pointed out, it's the most wonderful piece of technology. Does not require any energy source in itself. Can be taken anywhere, can be read. It's usually quite light as well, and stackable easily where you can see. A friend of mine, he's very thoughtful, said that nowadays it can be odd to go to somebody's house and not see any evidence of their interests because it's all online or it's stored in a device. So where before you could have gone to somebody's house and looked at their bookshelves and seen what they were interested in, now it could be stored in an e-reader and you've no clue. And also maybe DVDs you would have seen in the past, you would have seen, oh, those are your favourite films, and now quite often people of course are using the streaming facility and various other ways, so that it's not there as a visible clue to what people are interested in. I've tried e-readers, they just don't work for me. I miss the tactility, and I feel like I'm getting nowhere in the book because I turn the page and there's just another page of text. I've no sense of, oh, I'm in chapter 3, or looking at it I can say, oh, I'm a third of the way through the book or halfway there, and to refine something again, I really want, I can remember it in a book, I can go, it was around here and it was on the left page, whereas in an e-reader, yes, you can type it in and that's probably the quickest way to find it, but you still have no sense of kind of where it is in the book, I think. Although I think it's wonderful that you can have an e-reader and have so many books packed into it, ready to open up and be read at any point. I just can't get used to it myself. Prompt 3. How much you read. Do you read more or less than previously? When do you read, and how often you read changed? I think I read less than previously for an interest, certainly. Probably at this moment in time should be reading an academic book, and I think I'll get back to it after I've done this. This is my treat before the work. But because I've got so many academic books to read, and books that I want to read, and books that I hear of through my course and think, I want to read that, that takes up a lot of my thinking space, my reading space, my bookshelf space as well. And because I'm borrowing books from the academic library, of course, and they have to be returned safely. So I would just simply say that I read less for personal interest, and that I know I've seen on people's Booktube channels that they will often say, I went to university, I studied, I returned to college, and that it took them a year or two to get back to reading. It just took the joy out of it in a way. It became quite a business-like way of processing information. And question 4, how has Booktube changed you as a reader? I wish I discovered Booktube sooner. I probably about a year ago or more, during the pandemic, I found someone, it was probably all of a book all of someone, and they said, well, of course nobody reads as much as Steve Donaghy. And I went, who is this Steve Donaghy? And so I began looking at what he's done. And of course that's a whole other world to do with making us aware of starter kits and different ways to approach subjects, which is just brilliant. I keep looking for people who are interested in the subjects I am, in art and non-fiction, and they're few and far between, unfortunately. So I hope that this channel that I run will somewhere have somebody else who is also looking for the same kind of interest in books and finds my channel helpful. I find it weird to call it my channel because in the UK you have TV channels which are extremely large, things like the BBC. So to say my channel, it just sounds weird to me, but I understand it's the usual terms to use. So, how has Booktube changed me as a reader? There are more books that I want to read. I am more aware of what's read in contemporary fiction because I'm not really reading in that genre myself, but I keep hearing of the books that other people are reading. It gives me the gimmies sometimes when I watch certain videos. I think, oh yes, I want that book. Oh yes, oh that book sounds fascinating. But I love the availability of the book reading community, that I can at any point think, I want to hear somebody talking about a book they've read, or I want to hear so-and-so's version of things, or what are they reading? And I can just click and the person is there showing books, and I find a joy in the covers of books themselves are quite interesting, and I become aware of the fact that books appear differently clothed, so to speak, in America as in here. And shallow as it may seem to say we judge by book covers, to be honest, I do. I partly do. So I feel more part of a reading community. I know that in the past people used to come into my house and say, oh, so many books, and I never ever ever felt that there were half as many books as I wanted to be there if I had more money and more time. So now I know that to be true because I think a lot of booktubers have a lot more books than I do. And as I say, a lot of the ones I've read were in public libraries whenever I was younger, and so they're not here to show. I think at first I felt through watching Booktube I should have copies of the classics on my shelves. And then as I've gone through looking at secondhand books, I've realised, wait a minute, the one books you are definitely going to always find selling cheap and available are the classics. There will never be, I don't think, any problem in finding a Penguin copy of a Dickens novel or a Jane Austen and so forth. So I feel more at peace about not having to buy the book, to say, just read the book, be aware of it. It will always be, should be there to borrow it in public libraries. Although I have been dismayed at being at a public library and seeing books which to my mind are not dated being sold and thinking, these are going out of public circulation and that is a loss, and feeling indignant that I suppose the library has to keep up with what new books are coming out, but sometimes you come across books that are a loss not to still be there in the system because they are of worth. So I guess it's the same on a smaller level with our own personal libraries, is that we're constantly thinking, what do I keep? What do I bring in? What do I let go? And being aware of that system. So in terms of tagging, anybody who wants to do it, have a go. And I hope that what I've said is of interest to somebody else. So thank you for being with me as I made an excuse to get away from doing something serious and instead went to do something enjoyable. The evolution of a reader tag. I hope you'll give it a go yourself. Bye for now.